Today we're going to be making some rice for a couple of different dishes, and we're going to be using Basmati and Jasmine rice, and we're going to be making and freeze drying some white rice, basically unseasoned, a little bit of salt maybe, but otherwise, or chicken stock actually, and then otherwise just white. And then we're going to be doing a paella slash fried rice inspired rice dish for a backpacking meal. All right, there's 2 cups going in. All right, there's the 3rd cup. Today we're going to be using chicken broth for the liquid, and we're just going to get this opened up and get 3 cups into the Instapot. Alright, so we're adding a little bit of Himalayan sea salt to 3.5 cups of chicken broth and 3 cups of basmati rice. And this is just going to be the effectively the white rice version that we're going to be making today. So we're going to give that a stir. Alright, there's our first batch. Got the lid on. You can hear by the beeps that it's all good. And on this particular Instapot, there's not a rice setting per se, but that's okay because we're just going to go with pressure cook. We're going to set it for about 8 minutes, and we're going to start that. We're going to turn off warm, and once it's done cooking, we're going to let it rest naturally for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and then vent it. Alright, I'm going to vent it because it's been 10 minutes after it finished cooking. So we're just going to let that vent and get it opened up. Okay, it's all done venting. And lots of steam. Alright. Looks like I expected. So we're going to fluff that up and get it on some Harvest Right trays to cool, and go ahead and clean the pot out and get the next rice dish going. Alright, so we got about half of the basmati rice onto 1 tray. So we're going to just stick that in the oven to let it cool to room temperature, and we'll go ahead and get the 2nd tray loaded up, and then we'll start our batch of jasmine rice. Okay, we've got 3.5 cups of chicken stock back in the Instapot. We have turned it on to saute because we're going to be adding some products to this. This is going to be not just white rice, but it's going to end up being kind of a paella fried rice inspired backpacking dish. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric per cup of rice. We're using 3 cups of rice, so we're going to do 3 1/4 teaspoons of turmeric, We're going to be adding 1 packet of fried rice seasoning, just because, and it's made for 3 cups of rice, so that's easy. And then we're going to be using some garlic chili paste, yeah, I guess that's garlic chili paste, even though it's not really a paste, it's more of a sauce. But we're going to be using 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoons total. That's what we're going to do. You could do a tablespoon. I'm making this for a group of friends and just want to make sure it's not overly hot. And then we are going to add 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. And if you're concerned about, you could use Bragg's aminos in place of soy sauce. But if you're concerned about sodium, which in the backpacking environment we're typically not, because you're getting rid of electrolytes as you exert yourself. So we're going to go ahead and use 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. And then we're just going to get those combined in a heated broth before we dump in the 3 cups of jasmine rice. So I'm just going to dump that stuff in there now in the proportions I just described, and then we'll come back when we're getting the rice put in. And just give that a stir before putting your rice in. And the only reason we're heating this up and making sure this is stirred is just to make sure that all the components are equally distributed in the broth, and it's starting to heat up there. And you're not wanting to reduce this, so don't let this come to a boil and then walk away from it for 10 or 15 minutes. You're just wanting to go ahead and preheat it up. That will help us getting pressure built up while we're pressure cooking, and just make sure that all these flavors get dissolved in the broth equally. So now we're just going to add the 3 cups of jasmine rice. Okay, we got our 3 cups of rice in here, and we're just going to give that a stir. And then we're going to get the lid on and just rinse and repeat what we did last time. So we're going to pressure cook it for 8 minutes and turn off the warmer, and then let it naturally rest for 10 minutes and then take it out. And with any luck, we're going to have some seasoned, fluffy rice that will ultimately be combined with other freeze-dried products like chicken and sausage and ham and shrimp and vegetables to make the final backpacking dish. Okay, we'll get the lid on and get it cooking. Okay, so about 5 minutes into the pressure cooking, I got a burn notice on the Instapot, and nothing is burned. The Instapot is really good about protecting you from burning your food. And so then what I decided to do was just to put the lid back on in sealing mode, meaning that it's not venting, and then just let it sit for 15 minutes. And so I've tasted it, and it's just basically perfect. So it's got a little bit of spice to it. Sorry about the steam there. A little bit of spice to it, but it's nice and, you know, not sticky. So the grains are nice and individual, and I did not use oil in this. That may have prevented the burn notice if I'd sprayed the bottom, I don't know. But anyway, this is going to work fine. So we're going to get this loaded up in some plates and then let it cool to room temperature, and then start the freeze dry cycle on this rice. Alright, we'll get a little more rice here on the end. Fill out this tray. Make sure that it's as uniform as possible and not really thicker than the height of the tray. And then we'll get this one finished off and get the second one and let them cool. Okay, so all the trays of rice have cooled to room temperature. These are not frozen, but we've got them loaded in here. And so 3 cups of rice, once it's cooked, is really taking up 2 trays in the medium Harvest Right freeze dryer. And that would be roughly level with the top of the tray. And so what I've done is I've got the jasmine seasoned rice, and then I've got the basmati. And the basmati, probably blowing out the highlights there. The basmati rice, as far as a long grained rice goes, this may actually be better than the jasmine rice, if that's what you like, is a long flaky's the wrong word, but individual grain rice. And then I've staggered the tray slots here. So then we've got the other tray of the seasoned jasmine rice here. And then we've got basmati on top. So the reason I've done that is because I want to find out if there really is. It seems like sometimes products that are heavy water content products, they don't freeze dry as well on the bottom shelf, and I suspect that's because they're the closest to the cooling drum, but I don't really know. And so I just thought this would be a good opportunity to check the bottom shelf against one of the center upper, the third shelf up shelf, and just see if there's any difference. So we'll find out, but these aren't sauces, and so they may both freeze dry identically. In any case, we're going to get the insulating pad on, get it covered, and get the cycle started. And we will come back to you when it's done. Okay, well, it's been 19 hours, 4 minutes, and 46 seconds. And the Harvest Right thinks that it's ready to go. So let's check it out. This is the seasoned rice. Certainly feels freeze dried. All right, I mean, it looks good. This is the basmati rice. That's a chunk. But yeah, I mean, it just looks good. Freeze dried well. And that just seasoned with salt. A little bit of salt, not very much actually. So yeah, well, we are going to get these packaged up, and then we're going to be combining them into some meals. So we're just going to get them packaged in some of the thinner Mylar bags, large bags, and we'll be back with you shortly. And here are our 2 bags that we've got packed up. So this is, again, 3 cups cooked rice, and this is the seasoned rice that we're ultimately going to package up into a paella inspired meal. And this is the plain basmati rice. So those will last until we get a few minutes to put the meals together for our backpacking buddies. All right, so a few days have passed and we're ready to put together this meal. We're going to call it Paella Surprise, and it's going to have shrimp, chicken, ham, rice, and vegetables in it. And we've added some basic hydration directions to the bag before we fill it up, because it just makes riding on it so much easier. And you know, there are different strategies for rehydrating foods. Some people like, and initially when I started doing this, you know, I would weigh everything before and after and really try and get down to the gram on how much water to add. And that's a great method if you want to do that. I think what we're shifting to, because we're backpack centric, sort of outdoor centric, not just pure pantry prepping or trying to store food for SHTF situations, we're really changing things up. And so one of the things in particular is, instead of being real particular about the grams of water you need to add back, is we just start with a little bit less than we think we need, and then you add to it as it's hydrating until it's the right consistency, and that way you don't end up with soup unless you're making soup. So I've added some basic directions here. You know, start with 3.5 to 4 cups of water and add water as needed when you're hydrating. And one of the strategies that's different when you're in the backcountry is that, for example, you have finite fuel source if you're taking a stove and that's how you're doing it. If you're just cold soaking it, well, then no worries, you're always using cold water, and it's just time, so the time increases. And if you're using wood and doing a fire, then you know, that creates some variability as well. But basically the concept is you're just trying to put water back in these products. And so heat affects that, and time are really the two largest components that affect hydration. The other thing that's really changed this year compared to last year, and you'll see this in the playlist from last summer's big trip, backpacking trip that we took, is basically we prepared all the meals as if we were just going to eat them right then at home, and then we just freeze dried those products. So all the sauce, all the proteins, you know, any vegetables, carbs that were in the meal, they all got made exactly like we would eat it at home, and then we freeze dried that. Now, it worked great. There was no material problems. Everybody loved the food. So it's a huge success, and it's no problem to do it that way. And if you're storing food for the pantry, it probably makes sense to do it that way. I think one of the things, especially rehydrating at altitude when you're trying to use a stove and get things done simply and quickly, water doesn't boil at the same temperature. So the water can be boiling when you're at 10,000, 11,000 feet, but it's not nearly going to be the same temperature as it is at sea level or 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet. I mean, the temperature of the water, even though it's boiling, is a lot different than when you do it at home, which is one of the reasons when we test hydrate here, we're just using like water out of the Keurig, which is not really boiling, but it's similar to what you might expect in the backcountry, but you still don't have wind and temperature variations. And when you're hydrating in your home, conditions are a lot more stable than they are outdoors. And so it's really just getting comfortable with cooking. And so one of the things that we noticed on several products last year, like Szechuan chicken, butter chicken, not the Mongolian beef, but like braised beef that we did, is those coatings, because we cooked them in the sauce as if we were going to eat it and then freeze dried it, that it seemed to, in the outdoors, delay the hydration longer than we expected. And so this year what we're doing is we're taking the individual components and we're putting them all together. And so in this case, for the Paella Surprise, we've got the seasoned rice that you just watched me make, and it's freeze dried. You know, it's rice. So if you had an infinite fuel source and no concerns about your controlled environment, I mean, you don't even need to freeze dry the rice, right? It's just you make the rice from dried rice. But in this case, we went ahead and done all the sauce, everything, freeze dried the rice, And this is where the sauce is. And then the other components that we're going to add are going to be shrimp, and we've got ham and chicken are the proteins that are going into this dish. And then we're going to be adding some vegetables, freeze-dried vegetables, both the corn and peas and beans, along with the onions and bell peppers and celery that we're going to be adding as well. And that way, for example, the shrimp aren't coated in any kind of a sauce or anything that are going to slow them down, because the sizes, ideally the sizes of all these proteins would be the same if you're wanting them to hydrate. It's much like cooking. You know, if you expect things to get done at a similar time, then they need to be a similar size. And in this case, that's not the case. The shrimp are much larger, for example, than the diced ham. And so we're just going to try that this year, doing the components that way, and see what kind of feedback we get. I think based on just our indoor testing, it's going to work out better this way, but we'll see. So what we're going to start with is we're just going to open this bag and put the components together. And this is, I think, a gallon-sized bag. It's pleated on the bottom. It's a 7mm aluminum mylar bag with a zip closure. And we're going to start by putting the largest sized particles, the shrimp, in first. And we're just going to do that way. And so I've got a couple of pounds of extra large shrimp here. In they go. And the next largest thing that we have is going to be the chicken. And we're going to add 1 cup of the chicken. You could do this by weight, but I think we're just going to go by volume, roughly. So we're adding 1 cup of chicken. We'll refill that later. The next largest item are the vegetables. So we're going to add 2 cups of vegetables, and that's the carrots and corn and peas and green beans, and then we'll reseal these later. And then we're going to add 1 cup of the onions, celery, and green and red bell peppers into the mix. All right, and then it's just the rice. So we're going to take this, and this is 3 cups of cooked rice, and so it's going to be a lot of rice. This is the main dish for 6 people, and I'm just going to dump that, all of it, in here. And so right now the bag is darn near, I couldn't zip this if I wanted to, but hopefully, because we put the larger stuff first in the bottom, then we'll be able to agitate this and get the smaller grains to fill in the voids in the larger product at the bottom. And so now we have a lot more room in the bag, and easily going to be able to get it sealed up in the vacuum sealer. It's not necessary to zip these and seal them. The zipper is just a convenience for when you're in the backcountry and you've pulled off the seal. Then if you want to add water and seal it up to try and preserve heat in it, then you can do that. And we also, from time to time, will use koozies that we've made to slide these into so that it helps keep the warmth in. Now you could also put this in a pot and control it over the stove, and that way if you add extra liquid you can reduce it. And that's great as long as you have fuel, but when you're going out on an 8 to 10 day unsupported trek, you don't always end up with fuel because you're not wanting to carry, you know, a lot of extra weight. And so I think on the last trip, the last day, I mean, we had no canister fuel for stoves, and that's not unusual, and it's not a problem. And it wasn't a problem for us. So if you need to make a little cook fire, you can, or you can just cold soak these products, and you know they're great. So if you like leftover Chinese or paella, which I do, then you know eating cold freeze-dried food is fine as long as it hydrates. So hopefully we'll get better hydration. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take maybe a cup of this product that's mixed, and we'll rehydrate it here once we get the bag sealed up. So stay tuned for that. We'll go get this sealed up and rehydrate a cup of it for you, show you what that looks like, and talk about the times, just keeping in mind that, you know, we are in a house and there's no wind effect here, and we're not going to be using a stove. You could do this on a stove. We're just going to pour hot water, like coffee temperature water, right out of the Keurig. Instead of running coffee, we're just going to put hot water into a measuring cup and dump it into a container and rehydrate it and see how it does. Here we go. Okay, so we're back from sealing it, and one of the things you'll notice, I was in a hurry, and I did add a cup of ham, of the diced ham, into the final mix, and then I was in a hurry to seal it, and I did, and I realized I didn't add the oxygen absorbers to scavenge the oxygen out of the bag, and so if you seal them up high, then you can do what I did, which was just cut a big enough piece of the seal off so you can shove the oxygen absorbers down in there and then reseal it and still be above the little notch to tear it off. So save the bag that way. Anyway, I'm going to go make some hot water out of the Keurig, and we're going to rehydrate this half cup of the Paella Surprise. Okay, so here is our half cup of the Paella Surprise. And so there's one shrimp in there. I wanted to make sure we got a shrimp in the test. And then there's chicken, ham, rice, vegetables, exactly what we prepared in the dish. And to that, what we're going to do is we're going to add some water. And because it's about half a cup, we're going to add about half a cup. Now, when I made this coming out of the Keurig, it was 170 degrees. I don't think you can see that, but it's already cooled down to about 155 Fahrenheit. And I did make it through my coffee maker, so we got some grounds and a little tint there, but that's no problem. And we're just going to dump that in. And how much did I use there? So that's a little over half a cup of water that we dumped in, 154 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a good test. Man, it already smells good. And that may be a little much water, but we'll see. So we're going to let that go for about 15 minutes, and we'll come back and check it out. Okay, so that is 15 minutes, and see what the temperature is. So you probably can't read that, but it's 100 degrees. So it's cooled down to 100 degrees, and there's still some excess liquid in it. And I tested my Keurig several times, and on the small cup setting, which is what I used, it produces 7 ounces of hot water every time. And we ended up with a quarter cup or 2 ounces of water in the measuring cup, which means that I used 5 ounces of water instead of what I had intended, which was half a cup or 4 ounces. So no surprise, it's a little extra, but you know, if you were cooking this, you could reduce that, or in this case, we're probably going to let it go another 5 minutes or so and see if it hydrates more, and if not, we'll just drink that. But let's go ahead now at the 15-minute mark and just test some of these things and see how they are. So let's check the pea and onion. Yeah, the pea is not fully hydrated yet. The onion was. Let's check a piece of chicken. So that's a piece of chicken and onion and a little bit of rice. The chicken is fully hydrated. The onion, obviously, and the rice seems good too. Let's try some ham and rice. Yeah, the ham's good to go. The rice is good to go. Let's try a different pea. Oh, let's try a green bean. Fully hydrated, a little al dente, but good to go. Tastes great. Let's try some carrot and corn and ham. Yeah, they're great. So far, the only thing that needs a little more time are the peas. Let's try this one. No, the peas are just going to need more time. So we're going to let this sit for a few more minutes and we'll come back to it. Give it 5 more minutes and we'll come back to it. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes. The temperature is 92 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is where we're at. So there's still a little bit of liquid remaining. And let's take a bite with a pea. And then we're going to plate this up. Check that out. All right, that pea was fully hydrated. That one was too. All right, so that's great. So we started with 154 degree temperature water when we added it to the freeze-dried recipe. And now it's 92 degrees. It's been 20 minutes. We're sitting inside a house with no wind, and it's fully hydrated. Now, there's still the shrimp that we haven't tested, but I'm going to plate this up since we are in the house. We're going to plate this up and probably add a little bit of garlic chili sauce and just see what it could look like. And obviously, if you were cooking this at home for a meal, or if the power was just out or whatever, you could reduce this liquid a little more anyway, and it would just be perfect, and only take not nearly 20 minutes probably to hydrate if you were adding heat. So we'll get this plated up and come back to you in a second. Okay, so we emptied out our hydration bowl and we plated it up to this. So this for sure would work for your family or something if you were at home. And I added a couple of sprigs of freeze-dried basil from the garden last fall, and I added about a teaspoon of garlic chili sauce. So let's try this shrimp and see how it is. Yummy. Yeah, I mean, that's really good. That's delicious. And again, if you were cooking this in on a range, it would be even better. Just because you could control the temperature and everything. But this is going to be the bomb in the backcountry. And it turns out that 5 ounces was just about perfect. There's a little bit of moisture, free liquid there, but that's not a big deal. Yum. I should stop eating. The basil really adds a nice touch, actually. I'll have to remember to bring some of that on the backcountry trips, because it's really good. Alright, well that wraps us up for the paella surprise video, and it sure was good tasting it here in the studio. Hopefully it'll be as good for our backpacking buddies that are doing taste testing for these meals. I'm going to be delivering this product, and they're headed out this weekend to the mountains in Utah for a winter backpacking trip. I've asked them to shoot video of their rehydration and meal prep and taste testing in the field. And so hopefully they do that, and if they do, I'll try and put together a follow-up video that shows their experience in the backcountry in real-life conditions in the outdoors. So stay tuned for that. If you have comments, leave them in the comments section. I'll try and get back to those promptly. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Make sure to ring the bell and select the option so that you get notifications every time that we update new content here on the channel. Also, if you want a little extra content, I am active on Snap and Instagram, and that'll get more active as we move into springtime and just being outdoors more and doing more things that I post on those channels. So check those out, and remember, whenever you can, get up, get out, live a little. See ya. And then we've got peppers that are just starting to pop up here. So before you know it, these will all be grown up, and we'll be planting them out in the garden.